Imagine being told year after year that you must behave like a guest in a home that you've where you built the furniture, you paid for the furniture, you cooked the meals, you paid the mortgage, you've defended the place against storms. This is the curious predicament of the immigrant in contemporary discourse. Welcomed often warmly, but never quite adopted. And Arnold Schwarzenegger today, that muscular embodiment of the American dream, said that immigrants should behave like guests. Gracious, yes. Respectful, certainly. But adequate, no. To contrast this idea with conditional hospitality, this idea of conditional hospitality with ancient Rome, for example, with the ancient Roman principle of adoption, is to grasp something deeper and I think more enduring, that immigration is not merely a visit, it's a transformation. And the true analogue for immigration is not guesthood, it's adoption. And to understand that, you begin where the Romans did with their principle of adoptio and its more solemn cousin, aggregatio. And these were not sentimental decisions, they were civic acts. A Roman adoptee didn't become a ward or a junior partner, he became, in every legal sense, part of the family, and in a spiritual sense, he became a son. And he inherited the family name, the property rights, and even the sacred duties to the household gods. And most crucially, this bond could not be undone. A natural son, by contrast, could be disinherited or even exposed at birth. Roman adoption, once ratified, was stronger than nature because it was chosen, a deliberate act of inclusion. And the adopted citizen was more Roman than the Roman born. And that's why that's the strength of the adopted relationship between, for example, Julius Caesar and his nephew Octavius, who then becomes Octavianus. Once you get fully adopted, you get the anus bit or anus bit added to your name, Octavianus. In the case of Octavian, he then added the name Caesar directly, and then all subsequent Caesars adopted that name, or all subsequent emperors adopted that name. When St. Paul writes in Romans 8, you've received the spirit of adoption as sons, he's not waxing poetic. He's making a legal, cultural, and theological claim. God, in Paul's imagery, is pater familias, the father who chooses. The believer is not the tolerated outsider, but the natural, not the natural descendant, not an accident of birth, but somebody drawn into the household with intention, with full rights and eternal security under the principles of Roman law. Paul's metaphor is elegant. You don't drift into the divine family, you're adopted into it. You are renamed, repositioned, and irrevocably bound into that new family. It's rather clever. Now, if we consider immigration in this light, is the immigrant a guest, temporary, conditional, half-seated at the table, always fearing that they can be thrown out? Or is the immigrant a son or daughter adopted into the civic household who has made a decision to belong to another nation? Guesthood, after all, implies temporary courtesy. Adoption implies permanent belonging. When someone emigrates, they don't merely cross borders, they sever civic links to one patria and they bind themselves to another, and they often do so through a grueling bureaucratic gauntlet, through sacrifice, separation, hope, and expense. This is not a holiday, this is a rebirth. And when a state accepts an immigrant, especially in naturalization, it shouldn't treat that individual as a lodger, a temporary dweller. The Roman model demands something greater, adoption into the civic body, equal in duty, equal in right. Schwarzenegger is right to say that immigrants owe something to their new home, respect, contribution, lawful conduct, but that duty is reciprocal. And a true host doesn't simply tolerate a guest. A true host, in the Roman spirit, for example, welcomes a new member into the household. If we expect the immigrant to make the bed and keep things tidy, we must in turn offer them keys to the house, not just a mattress on the floor that can be taken away at the whim of the owner. To view citizenship as adoption elevates the moral status of both migrant and host nation. It says this bond is not a contract of convenience, but a covenant of shared identity. In the modern world, we've got the idea of both immigration and adoption wrong. I was an adopted child, and At some point, my father, my father said he disinherited me. Well, that's fine. And and when my father died, that was it really. But I was told I wasn't invited to the funeral, and and I thought I was already thinking at the time, adoption is a choice, and it should not be revoked. And I wasn't old enough to make that choice. I wasn't old enough to say I wanted to live in that family. Um, my mother had died long before, and my mother was uh, oh she did her best. And of the two mothers that I've got, the mother who raised me is the one that I would regard as mother. The birth mother was I've since met her. She was an aberration, and I had a very lucky escape really. But um, I've never met my birth father, and as I say, my adopted father was an out and out shit. But so I speak of this subject with a certain amount of passion, and and I think Mr. Schwarzenegger is an unmitigated twit, and his language is abusive. Um, and the idea that immigrants should behave like guests is tidy, comfortable, but ultimately insufficient and insulting. A guest can be asked to leave, a son cannot be unmade. Rome understood that identity is more than birth, it's choice, loyalty, and transformation. And Paul understood that faith is not tribal inheritance, it's adoption by grace. And we need to understand, if we are to be just, that citizenship is not mere paperwork, it's a moral bond stronger than blood, sealed by sacrifice, and deserving of permanence. The immigrant is not a stranger, not a supplicant, not a guest, not somebody who, when they stray, is put in prison and then exiled and thrown out of the country. The immigrant, rightly welcomed, is family, and we need to treat them not as guests in George Washington's parlour, or in or in Westminster, but as heirs to whichever country they've chosen to live in, whether it's America, whether it's Britain, whether it's Greece, or whichever country, Italy, whichever country somebody chooses to live, chosen, bound, and irrevocably ours.